Eli Morgan wasn't the type to make waves. He preferred silence over confrontation, pine needles over pavement, solitude over small talk. So when his boots crunched onto the gravel path leading to his newly finished off-grid cabin, the only thing he expected to hear was the whisper of wind through the trees. Instead, he saw red. A laminated notice aggressively stapled to a maple tree just 10 feet from his front porch flapped in the breeze like a flag of war. Notice of violation. Unauthorized structure. You have 72 hours to remove the non-compliant building, or face escalating penalties. Lakeshore Homeowners Association, HOA. Eli read it twice, then a third time. His stomach dropped like a stone into the lake behind him. This couldn't be real. The cabin wasn't a shack thrown up in a weekend. He'd spent 6 months building it with his own hands, shaping every beam from reclaimed wood, insulating it with care, designing it for self-sufficiency. It sat nestled on a gentle slope, overlooking the glassy lake. There were no roads, no nearby homes, just his grandfather's land stretching peacefully for acres, and now apparently a bureaucratic army had decided it was illegal. He pulled the paper off the tree slowly, folded it with shaking hands, and walked inside. The interior of the cabin smelled of cedar and coffee beans. His dog Atlas lifted his head from the rug and let out a low, confused whine. Eli sat down hard at the table and stared out at the water, heart thudding. He didn't even know there was an HOA. When he inherited the property a year ago, there was no mention of it. No welcome packet, no fees, no neighbor knocking with rules or warnings. It was raw land, forest, and lakefront. No paved roads, no streetlights, no garbage service. Just nature. And now, someone had found a way to claim dominion over it. That night, Eli didn't sleep. Instead, he opened a laptop and dove into county GIS maps, zoning files, anything public he could access. After hours of searching, he found something both irritating and vague, a large yellow-shaded section labeled Lakeshore Community Boundary. His grandfather's land was on the very edge, not clearly outside it, but not clearly within either. Gray area, perfect territory for HOA sharks. The next morning, Eli drove down to the community center, where the Lakeshore HOA was headquartered, a sprawling, smug-looking clubhouse with a dock and golf cart parking out front. He walked in wearing work boots and a flannel, already bracing for nonsense. Inside, he was met by a receptionist with a frozen smile. "Are you here about the notice?" she asked. He nodded. "I'd like to speak to whoever issued it." She called someone on a headset. Minutes later, a woman in a pressed navy blouse walked briskly into the lobby. "I'm Susan Hargrove, HOA president," she said, not offering a hand. "You must be Mr. Morgan." He followed her into a meeting room that smelled of carpet cleaner and passive aggression. She slid a folder across the table. "You built a non-permitted secondary structure on community-controlled land," she said matter-of-factly. "You're in violation of multiple bylaws. Page 4. Eli opened the folder. Grainy drone photos of his cabin, a blurry map with thick highlighter lines and structure scrawled in red ink. "My family's owned that land for nearly a century," Eli said, keeping his tone level. "No one ever said anything about it being under HOA control." "Well," Susan replied, tapping her nails on the table. "The community charter was updated in 1998. If you'd like to contest it, you're free to bring it up at the next board meeting, but the 72-hour window stands." She smiled like someone who'd already won. Eli left with a copy of the violation notice and a sour feeling in his chest. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a warning shot. What they didn't know was, Eli didn't back down. Especially not on land that carried his grandfather's name. He wasn't going to tear down his cabin. He was going to tear down their assumptions, and they'd regret waking the quiet man in the woods. Eli Morgan walked into the next Lakeshore HOA board meeting feeling like a man headed into enemy territory. The room, lit by buzzing fluorescent bulbs, was filled with folding chairs, plastic water pitchers, and quiet murmurs from residents, mostly retirees, bored but loyal to their neighborhood order. At the front sat 5 board members behind a long table, facing the audience like a tribunal. Front and center was Susan Hargrove, in the same navy blouse as before, her posture ramrod straight. Her eyes flicked up the moment she saw Eli and immediately narrowed. She hadn't expected him to show up. Next item on the agenda, Susan said, coolly, is a public comment regarding a property violation. Mr. Eli Morgan, Lot 43C. Eli stepped forward to the microphone. He cleared his throat. I live, or I'm trying to live, on the land my grandfather left me. Lot 43C. Last week I found a notice ordering me to tear down my cabin in 72 hours. A few heads turned. Murmurs rippled across the room. It's not a vacation rental, not a party shack. It's my home, built by hand, off-grid, and clean. I'm not asking for charity or special treatment. I'm asking for fairness, and proof that this HOA even has authority over my land. Susan cut in sharply. Mr. Morgan, the Lakeshore HOA was granted oversight of the entire community perimeter, including all internal and peripheral lots under the revised 1998 covenant. Section 7.4, Article C if you're interested. He was, and he had read it, twice. The language says, subject to mutual agreement by landowners at time of incorporation. My grandfather never signed. There's no record of him ever attending a meeting or paying dues. That drew a few whispers. Someone coughed behind him. A woman in the second row looked curiously at her neighbor. Susan's jaw tensed. If your family was negligent in attending to proper procedures, that doesn't exempt you from them now. We're simply enforcing the rules everyone agrees to when they join this community. I never joined, Eli said calmly, and no one ever asked. She opened her binder and turned a page with flair. You're welcome to bring this matter up with the HOA legal liaison, but until then, the 72-hour window stands. You're technically in non-compliance. That cabin needs to come down. A silence fell over the room. It was the kind of pause people usually reserve for when they expect someone to shout or storm out. But Eli didn't flinch. He stared back, at Susan, then slowly smiled. You know, for an organization so concerned with regulations, your maps are sloppy. The one you gave me last week? It's edited by hand. Boundary lines don't match county records. Susan's mouth opened, but no words came. I've already submitted a request for official parcel mapping from the county assessor's office, he added. Let's see which version the law recognizes. With that, he turned and walked out as he stepped into the evening air. A light drizzle dusted the parking lot. The smell of wet pine floated in from the woods. Back in his truck, Eli pulled out his phone and opened a folder he'd created the night before. HOA War Files. Inside were screenshots of every document, photo evidence of his cabins, location, and a scanned copy of something very interesting he'd discovered that morning in his grandfather's storage locker. Land deed dated 1929, signed by 2 parties, William Morgan, his grandfather, and a group calling themselves the Lakeshore Development Board, the early precursor to the HOA. The deed contained something Susan hadn't seen, a detail so small it could have been missed. It granted the development board permission to use a portion of the lakefront, but only under lease, and that lease had a very specific expiration date, one that was fast approaching. Eli leaned back in his seat and looked out toward the forest. They thought he was just another cabin squatter, but they'd just picked a fight with the actual landlord and he'd be collecting rent, one way or another. The next morning, Eli stood in the dusty light of his late grandfather's tool shed, the kind of place that smelled like old pine and engine grease. Boxes were stacked like forgotten monuments to a simpler time. Tackle boxes, yellowing maps, a rusted license plate from the 1960s. But it was the battered steel filing cabinet in the back corner that called to him now. Inside, he found exactly what he was hoping for, and something far more powerful than he'd expected. The folder was thick, the edges curled, and stamped in faded ink. Morgan Lakeshore Agreement, 1929. He carried it out into the sunlight like a sacred, Relic back at the cabin, Eli laid it open across his table. Atlas, his loyal shepherd mix, curled up nearby as if sensing something big was happening. Within the folder was a deed, handwritten in careful script, notarized and signed by his great-grandfather, William Morgan, and the founders of the original Lakeshore Development Board. This wasn't a mere land sale. It was a lease agreement, granting the board use of a lakeside parcel for community improvement and recreational purposes, in exchange for $1 per year. The term? 9 years. Non-renewable without express consent from the Morgan estate. Eli's breath caught as he did the math. Signed in 1929, 99 years. That lease expired. In 13 days, the parcel covered over 4 acres, and looking at the attached survey sketches, Eli recognized every curve of it. The clubhouse, the dock, the picnic area, even the parking lot, the very heart of the HOA's operations. They had built their entire empire on borrowed land, and they didn't even know it. Or maybe they did, and hoped he never would. He scanned the documents, backed up everything to 3 different drives, then called the only attorney he trusted, Layla Tran, a brilliant property rights lawyer he'd gone to college with. Within an hour, they were on a video call. Eli held up the deed to the camera. Layla's eyes widened halfway through reading it. "This is gold," she whispered. "Absolute gold. If that lease expires without renewal, you own everything on that land. They're trespassing the second that date hits." "What if they try to renew it?" Eli asked. "They can't," she replied. "Not unless you agree. That's the beauty of it. It's not automatic. The power's entirely in your hands." He leaned back, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Then let's give them something to consider." Layla laughed. "You thinking of charging them rent?" "Oh, I'm thinking of charging them back rent." That night, Eli poured himself a glass of bourbon and sat out on the cabin's porch. The lake shimmered under a bruised purple sky. He could see the lights from the clubhouse across the water, warm and festive. Music played faintly. Laughter echoed. They were hosting one of their weekly community mixers. He imagined Susan Hargrove standing at the bar, sipping her Chardonnay, boasting about her victory over the cabin squatter. He smiled. They didn't realize the land beneath their feet was slipping away, that the very soil their fancy events were built on was no longer theirs to command, and in less than 2 weeks the clock would strike 0. Eli didn't want revenge. He wasn't petty, but he was thorough. They had tried to erase him, tried to bulldoze a legacy built before their bylaws ever existed. Now the same land they'd used to control others would become his greatest weapon, and he'd wield it with precision. 12 days. That's how long the Lakeshore HOA had left before the land under their clubhouse, dock, and prized event lawn would no longer be theirs to claim. Not legally. Not structurally. Not without Eli Morgan's signature, and he had no plans to give it. Eli didn't waste time. With Layla Tran on retainer, he moved fast. Together they drafted a new lease agreement, tailored with surgical precision. The terms were sharp but fair, on paper. A base rent of $3,500 per month escalating yearly, with an option to buy the land for 7 figures. All utilities, upkeep, and taxes transferred to the HOA. Retroactive liability starting from the lease expiration date. And if they refused, immediate removal, eviction, trespassing charges. Eli printed the documents on heavyweight paper, slid them into a black envelope, and delivered them to the HOA office in person. Susan Hargrove wasn't there. Conveniently, a junior board member with a nervous smile took the envelope. "Make sure she sees it," Eli said, voice even. She nodded, visibly unsettled by the calm confidence in his tone. That night, Eli drove by the clubhouse. No one was laughing now. Lights were on, but the mood was different. Tense, defensive. He could almost feel them reading the lease terms aloud, choking on each clause like thorns in their throat. The next morning, the counterattack began. A code enforcement officer showed up on Eli's property, clipboard in hand. Routine inspection, he claimed. Complaint about improper gray water drainage and unauthorized solar panels. Eli didn't say much. just recorded the interaction and forwarded it to Layla. 2 days later, the power company accidentally shut off his grid connection, even though he wasn't connected to the grid. A neighbor's drone started hovering over his cabin, every evening lingering near the windows, and someone, amateurishly, left tire tracks across his access road, spinning out in the mud near his porch. He didn't retaliate. Not directly. Instead, he collected, documented, archived. He had trail cams hidden in the trees. He tracked every incident by time and date, every call, every visit, every anonymous complaint. One particular name showed up too often: Michael Hargrove. Susan's son, a bored, recently divorced real estate agent with a reputation for aggressive buyouts. Eli recognized the type. He'd dealt with people like him in the tech world, guys who confused intimidation with leverage, who never read the fine print until it crushed them. So Eli dug a little deeper. Turns out Michael had recently invested in several short-term rental properties nearby and had been quietly trying to acquire Eli's land for months. It all started to make sense. The urgency, the pressure, the hostility. This wasn't about a cabin, it was about control, real estate, profit. They saw a cabin in the woods. What they didn't see was a man raised by the kind of grandfather who wrote ironclad land leases in fountain pen ink and taught his grandson to never bow to bullies in suits. The next HOA board meeting wasn't open to the public, but that didn't matter. Eli sent a certified legal packet to each board member the day before, complete with a notarized copy of the original 1929 lease, the newly proposed lease terms, drone photos of current HOA structures on his land. A warning: 13 days remain. Then, he sat back and waited. The emails started rolling in. Some polite inquiries, some angry threats, some desperate requests for negotiation. But Susan? Radio silence. That was fine. Let her stall. Let her think she could outmaneuver a man who spent 10 years writing unbreakable code, because Eli didn't need to fight them anymore. The land was fighting for him, and time, the same weapon they'd once used against him, was about to snap back with razor teeth. 10 days remained. From the outside, the Lakeshore HOA still appeared pristine. Sprinklers hissed quietly over the lawn. A couple walked a poodle near the shoreline path. But beneath the surface, the foundation was cracking. Inside the HOA's private Slack channel, which Eli had gained access to thanks to a friendly IT contractor he'd helped out years ago, panic was brewing. Susan Rach: "We do not acknowledge the legitimacy of the 1929 lease. Legal says there's no digital filing. If it's not in county records, it doesn't exist. Karen Finance: "Except he's got notarized copies and county acknowledgement. If this goes to court, we'll lose." Tom Legal: "Recommend immediate negotiation. He has us. Clubhouse, dock, the whole thing, all on his parcel." Susan H: "We do not negotiate with extortionists." Tom Legal: "Then prepare to explain to residents why their dues are going up 400% to cover a relocation." Eli closed the laptop and sat back, watching the late afternoon sun bleed gold across the lake. Atlas rested nearby, calm but alert, as if sensing the tension too. In the distance, across the water, he saw it again, the drone. It was the 4th day in a row. This time, Eli didn't bother filming. He simply lifted a pair of binoculars and followed it back to its source, the second-story balcony of a home 2 lots down from the clubhouse. Michael Hargrove's place. Eli smiled grimly. Let him watch. Later that evening, an email landed in Eli's inbox. Subject: Urgent HOA proposal. Please respond from shargrovelakeshoreboard.org. The message was clipped and formal. Susan invited him to a closed-door negotiation with the board. Location: HOA Clubhouse. Time: 3 p.m., 2 days from now. Eli didn't reply. Instead, he made a few calls of his own. Layla would be flying in. She wanted to see this all unfold with her own eyes. And she was bringing a court reporter and a portable scanner. Let them try something clever. Let them bring their polished speeches and veiled threats. He was bringing documentation, law, and leverage. But the HOA wasn't done playing games. That night, someone attempted to break into the cabin. Atlas woke Eli with a low growl just past 2 a.m. Eli grabbed the flashlight and his old .357 revolver. He opened the door quietly and saw the shape of a man retreating through the woods, fast and clumsy. A faint glint of metal in his hand. Eli didn't fire. He didn't need to. The trail cams caught everything. So did the motion-activated floodlights. The man's face was clearly visible. Michael Hargrove. The next morning, Eli sent the footage, along with a trespass report, to the local sheriff. He didn't press charges. Not yet. Instead, he CC'd the entire HOA board in the email and attached the sheriff's confirmation. The message was simple. Your son has 24 hours to stay off my land, or the lease offer is rescinded. 9 days left. Eli Morgan. That same day, Eli received his first offer. It came not from Susan or Michael, but from board treasurer Karen Flynn. She wanted to talk. Quietly. Off the record. Look, she said over the phone, voice low. Not everyone on the board agrees with how this is being handled. There are families here, retirees. You could destroy everything. I'm not looking to destroy, Eli said calmly. But I'm not about to be pushed off land that's been mine since before this place had streetlights. Silence on the line. Finally, she said, how much would it take to walk away? Eli's grip tightened around the phone. They tried to erase me, he said. Now they'll pay for the eraser and the paper. He hung up. Because this wasn't about money anymore, it was about legacy, about standing where his grandfather once stood, and making sure no one ever bulldozed that history under HOA cement again. 8 days left. The Lakeshore HOA clubhouse sat perched over the lake like a smug monument to order, whitewashed, siding, faux colonial pillars, and a row of freshly planted begonias trying to distract from the storm brewing beneath the surface. At precisely 3 p.m., Eli Morgan stepped through its glass doors. He was dressed like he always was, jeans, boots, flannel, but his presence was anything but casual. He wasn't alone. Layla Tran walked in beside him, professional in a dark blazer, carrying a leather case. Behind her trailed a quiet, wiry man in glasses wheeling a mobile scanner and voice recorder. Court reporter. The board members were already seated around a long oval table in the main conference room. Susan Hargrove sat at the head, flanked by Karen Flynn, Tom from legal, and 2 other silent faces. Only Michael Hargrove was absent, likely under strict instructions to avoid making things worse. Susan didn't stand. Mr. Morgan, she greeted, tone clipped. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Eli didn't answer. He set a thick envelope on the table and took a seat opposite her. Layla sat beside him and gave a polite nod. Susan glanced at the envelope like it was ticking. Before we begin, Layla said calmly, we're recording this meeting for documentation purposes. As you are aware, the parcel in question contains several structures operated by the HOA, all of which sit on private land now under my client's exclusive authority. As of next week, that lease expires. Tom leaned forward. We're still investigating the validity of that claim. No, you're not, Layla interrupted. You've already acknowledged the lease exists. We have your internal emails. Tom stiffened. Karen looked away. Susan didn't blink. So, let's talk terms, Eli said, voice steady. Because when this lease expires, you'll owe me rent, insurance coverage, back payment for unauthorized use, and removal of all HOA signage from my property. Or, he pushed another envelope forward. You can sign this revised lease today. Susan didn't even open it. This is blackmail. No, Eli replied. This is business. You had 99 years of free land use. Now the clock's done ticking. Karen reached for the lease. Susan slapped a hand down, stopping her. You're trying to extort this community for money you didn't earn. Eli leaned forward. His tone dropped. My grandfather let your people use this land out of kindness. I'm here cleaning up the mess they left behind. If you want to talk about what's earned, Susan, let's talk about your son trespassing on my land, or the surveillance drone flying over my roof every night. The room froze. Karen's mouth opened. Wait. Michael did what? Eli slid a printed photo across the table. Michael, clear as day, stepping through Eli's trees, flashlight in hand. Susan's eyes flicked to it, and for the first time, her expression cracked. Briefly. Just enough to show fear. I haven't pressed charges, Eli continued. Yet. But don't mistake that for weakness. The silence was heavy. Finally, Karen spoke, barely above a whisper. Can we see the lease? Layla slid it across the table, still sealed. This version is merciful, she said. It allows continued use at a reasonable rate, with protective clauses for homeowners. Deny it, and we file for trespass, unpaid rent, and damages. You'll be in litigation for years. And this community, the dues, the reserves, the events, they'll bleed out long before a judge makes a ruling. Susan was staring at the envelope like it was a snake. She said nothing. Eli stood. You have 7 days. He turned and walked out, Layla and the court reporter following behind. Outside, the air was sharp and cool. The lake shimmered like glass. Layla glanced sideways. Think they'll sign? They'll break, Eli said. They just haven't figured out how yet. Behind them, the clubhouse door remained closed, but inside the board was unraveling, and the countdown had just hit 7. 7 days. The HOA board fractured by day 3. Karen Flynn resigned first. Her nameplate vanished from the office, and her email signature was stripped to former treasurer. She didn't send a farewell message. She sent a notarized affidavit, straight to Eli's lawyer, stating she had no confidence in current leadership and was concerned about escalating legal exposure. Tom, the board's legal advisor, followed the next morning. His exit email was terse. Retaining. Independent counsel. Do not contact. Inside the clubhouse, Susan Hargrove doubled down. She issued a community bulletin warning residents about a dangerous squatter with fabricated claims of land ownership, trying to whip up panic and paranoia. But the effort backfired. Spectacularly. One resident, a retired judge, quietly emailed Eli a copy of his personal title search. Everything checks out. HOA is clearly over the boundary. You've got them. Just be smart. Another neighbor, a single mother who hosted kids' events at the lakeside lawn, showed up at Eli's door with homemade peach cobbler and a whisper of gratitude. They've been bullies for years, she said. Don't let up. Support was shifting, and Susan could feel it. On the 5th day before lease expiration, a sleek black SUV pulled into Eli's gravel driveway. He watched from the porch as a man in a tailored jacket stepped out and approached with the cautious swagger of someone used to getting what he wanted. Mr. Morgan, the man said. Name's Greg Maddox. I represent the Lakeshore Property Investment Group. Mind if I sit? Eli gave a shrug. Atlas didn't bark, but his hackles lifted slightly. Greg produced a slim leather folder and handed it over. Inside was an offer. $2.4 million for the entire parcel. Fast close. Cash. No questions. We've been watching this situation unfold, Greg said. Frankly, it's becoming a mess. The HOA is falling apart. You've made your point, but everyone wins if you just take the money and walk. Eli scanned the pages. The price was real, the closing terms clean. The buyer? A shell company owned by none other than Michael Hargrove. He let the silence linger long enough to feel like pressure, then shut the folder and handed it back. I'm not selling, Eli said. Greg raised an eyebrow. Everyone has a number. I do, Eli replied. It just doesn't fit in your folder. Greg stood, tucking the offer away. This land is only going to get more difficult to hold. You might win the legal battle, sure, but communities have long memories. You could become the villain here, Eli leaned forward. Tell your client something for me. Go ahead. I don't need the community's approval, Eli said. I need their silence while I triple their rent. Greg didn't smile, just nodded curtly and walked back to the SUV. 3 days left. By now, the HOA office was a ghost town. Residents were confused, some angry, some frightened. The clubhouse staff had started whispering about shutdowns and late payments. A local news blog ran a headline, "Lakeshore imploding, leaked legal threats raise property value fears." That night, Eli received a text from a number he didn't recognize. Susan Hargrove. "Meet me alone, no lawyer, one chance to end this." He didn't reply. The next morning, he sent one final certified envelope to the HOA board, now down to 3 active members. Inside, a final lease revision, higher rent, immediate penalty clause, 48-hour eviction notice if unsigned by the expiration date, and a note, handwritten on the same old stationery his grandfather used nearly a century ago. "My land is not for sale. Not then, not now." Eli Morgan. Then he waited, because in 2 days they wouldn't just owe him money, they'd owe him everything. 0 days. At precisely 12:01 a.m., the 99-year lease expired. The moment passed without ceremony, no fireworks, no sirens, just a silence, stretching over Lakeshore, the kind that comes right before the tide pulls back and crashes forward. Eli Morgan was already awake. He watched the sunrise from his porch, sipping coffee brewed strong and black. Atlas lay curled at his feet. The lake shimmered, still and glassy, as if it too were waiting for something to snap. By 9 a.m., the emails began. First, a cease and desist from a desperate junior board member. Eli forwarded it to Layla, who responded with a single sentence. "Jurisdiction expired. Our turn now." At 10:30 a.m., a sheriff's deputy showed up. He wasn't there to arrest Eli. He was there to serve official notice of trespass to the Lakeshore HOA, naming the clubhouse, dock, parking lot, and community lawn as encroachments on private property. Susan Hargrove was on site when it was delivered. She stared at the notice like it was a bomb that had just been armed. "You can't be serious," she hissed at the deputy. He pointed to the badge on his chest. "Ma'am, I don't write the laws. I just serve them." She turned to Eli, standing calmly at the property line, arms folded. "You think this is over? You think you've won?" "I don't think," Eli replied. "I know." Then came the twist. Before she could spit out another threat, a line of vehicles rolled in behind her, moving trucks, vans, and a modest film crew. Layla stepped out of the lead van holding a clipboard. "Smile for the camera, Susan. You're on documentary now." "What?" Layla gestured to the camera crew. "We've partnered with a media startup to film a docuseries on HOA corruption. Working title, The Line in the Pines. Streaming. Rights already sold. You're exploiting this." "No," Eli said, stepping forward. "I'm documenting it. Your threats, your trespassing, your son breaking into my land, that drone, all of it." Then he pointed toward the clubhouse. "You have until noon to vacate. After that, the locks change. Your event calendar? Canceled. Your storage rooms? Cleared. And that dock? Already scheduled for removal." Susan looked ready to scream. Instead, she spun around, storming toward her car. Her voice echoed as she shouted into her phone, "Michael!" "He's going through with it. Get the lawyers." But it was too late. By 12:05 p.m., the locksmith arrived. Residents gathered nearby, murmuring, some angry, some stunned. A few, quietly, cheered. At 12:30 p.m., Eli walked through the doors of the clubhouse for the first time since his cabin had been condemned. This time he wasn't a guest. He was the owner of the land beneath it. Inside, he posted a large sign by the entrance. Notice. This property now operates under Lakeshore Ridge LLC. All previous HOA leases terminated. Event rentals subject to HOA. New agreement. E. Morgan that evening, he stood on the dock as the sun set over the lake. Layla joined him with a bottle of decent whiskey. "Well," she said, You just pulled off a hostile takeover without a single gunshot or board vote. I didn't want to destroy the community, Eli replied. Just remind them who it belonged to first. And now? He took a sip, then smiled. Now? I'll charge them less than they deserve, but more than they're used to. He, turned, facing the cabin nestled quietly in the trees behind him, and maybe rebuild the gazebo. She laughed. That'll really drive Susan crazy. Good, Eli said. Let her know how it feels to get an eviction notice with your name on it. The lake was calm again, but Eli knew better. Calm wasn't peace. It was power. Once reclaimed, and this time, he wasn't giving an inch back.